having the confidence to do that is probably the advice I'd give if I ever advised a Prime Minister.
And I think this is the age of jerks. Wow.
I mean, I could relive that every single day. Hi, it's Nick.
And it's Amol, and we have absolutely genuinely loved getting so many messages from you, our lovely listeners, and answering all your wonderful questions. Thank you so much for all the voice notes, emails, texts that you sent in. This week we're doing something slightly different in that we're answering questions from some celebrity friends of the podcast. That is, guests who've appeared to contribute their moment of the week. And to be a friend of the podcast is it's like part of the honour system, right? It's like you've entered the establishment in but podcasting land.
There is no honour greater, let us be honest, than doing the moment of the week on the Today podcast. But they've got some quite tickly questions for us here. These are not easy. These are not just like, thank you, friend. What do you think about this? Anyway, let's do it.
This is from a fellow giant of the podcasting world.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Amol. It's Greg Jenner here, historian, podcaster, that sort of thing. The question I get asked a lot is, how will our era be known to future generations, future historians? I have a sort of theory on this, but I'd love to know your perspective, because you're both more politically engaged and you've got your finger on the pulse. How will this time, this era, get labelled in the future? Thank you very much. Bye.
So this is what follows, as it were, the Cold War, the space age, the digital age. What's this age?
I think that this will be seen as, especially perhaps marked, chaptered, if you like, by the COVID pandemic as the end of the post-1945 world. The world in which American leadership of global institutions, nation states, basically ruled and kept things relatively stable, notwithstanding the Cold War. I think we're moving into a post-Western world, more like the 19th century, great powers, if you like, more Bismarck than Kissinger, as I've said before on this podcast. And I think that the big idea that we're going to remember is this was the moment where the West felt old. Old in two ways. Old because the post-1945 world is actually quite old. It's been around for a long time. And old because we've got very, very rapidly aging populations. And it's in the new world, Africa, Asia, that the energy and dynamism of this century is mostly deposited.
I agree with most of that. Two alternatives. One is the age of deglobalization.
Interesting.
Because in a way we've unwound a lot of the economic changes that brought countries together, made borders less relevant, made it more important to have big global clubs of nations. We've seen the assertion of national identity. That's one possibility. I did think of the era of instability, because what has struck me is since the banking crisis of 2008, we've seen the abnormal become the normal. In other words, that governments come and go, prime ministers and presidents come and go. This is, in some ways, the age of instability.
I've got a phrase which I want to copyright right now. And if anyone's going to nick it off me, I want payment direct to my bank account. And my phrase is, a lot of people have written books about how that chapter you're talking about in human history, Nick, was known as the Great Acceleration, driven by technology. People will know that acceleration is the rate of change of speed. The rate of change of acceleration is jerks. And I think this is the age of jerks.
I don't think your bank account's going to be that full, actually.
Don't you think jerks works quite because of the whole you've got jerks as both jerks and then
I love
jerks.
short phrases that then require a thesis to explain them. Like a kind of footnote.
Anyway, Greg, we are stumbling, Greg, into a new epoch. Exactly what that looks like depends partly on AI. But
I want to know Greg's answer. We haven't got it. I will have to get it later.
Send us a voice note, Greg. Come on, what's your answer, old boy? We want to hear it.
What about another celebrity question?
Hi, Nick and Amol. It's Helen Lewis from The Atlantic. I have a question, which is, if you could relive any single day in your career, what would it be? And now that can either be something that was so exciting or wonderful or momentous that you just love to be a part of it again, or something that you really messed up and you'd like to have another crack at. Thank you.
I've got two answers there.
Go on.
Standing on the Berlin Wall on the day it came down. Wow. I mean, I could relive that every single day. You know, amazingly, I didn't take a photograph. I mean, of course, we're way before the era of camera phones. I left here in a tearing rush because I was sent at the last minute to go. I don't think I even took the camera. I was a producer, yeah. In fact, my reporter got a call. I could hear one end of the conversation. I thought, I know what this is. Will you go out to Berlin? And I grabbed the phone and said, my grandparents lived in Berlin. Can I go? You know, and I was, God, what was I? 26. You know, I just wish I could relive it. It was an amazing moment. There's one other I'd relive just because I messed it up so badly.
I can go. How long have you got here? We've got, okay, no, go on, tell us.
It actually isn't Boris Johnson, and I wish I'd not told him to stop talking. This was when I chose to have coffee with my mum instead of preparing for the live coverage of the election of the leader of the Labour Party.
Always right to have coffee.
In 2015. Always right, other than I didn't know what I was talking about when I had to do the live broadcast. And therefore, I'm just blushing as I mention this, that when I saw David Miliband smile when the beginning of the results was read out, that he'd won. Whereas it was a kind of winsome smile, meaning, my God, I've lost to my brother. I actually got the result wrong, live on air. Terrible.
Oh, my goodness. That's
embarrassing.
That is really bad.
But it's all my mum's fault.
Well, don't blame your gorgeous, wonderful mother. Given you've done two answers, I'll do two quick ones. In terms of that hand of history on our shoulders moment, I took myself off as a young reporter on The Independent. I wasn't sent by The Independent at all, but I was so sort of taken by the global phenomenon that was Barack Obama that I went off to Chicago and Grant Park, obsessed with US politics. And I remember David Usborne, who, if you're listening, David, I think you might have moved to a Pacific island. Anyway, David, if you're listening, I can't thank him enough. US editor of The Independent somehow wangled me a ticket, a security pass to get into Grant Park and be there when Barack Obama was giving that speech, 17 minutes in January 2008. And I was about 25 metres from him as he gave this extraordinary speech in what felt like history, and I thought that's what it is to be a journalist. But the instinctive answer to what Helen says is the day I found out I was going to become editor of The Independent, I was on a stag do, Nick, in Barcelona, which I'd organised because I was best man. We'd not had any sleep, shall we say. It was a sunny afternoon. We're in a square in Barcelona, and I got a text saying, it's a Saturday afternoon, saying, announcement Monday, come home. And I blurted this out to all of my mates saying, guys, you're not going to believe me. I've just been made editor of The Independent. And they thought that I really was showing the effects of lack of sleep. But it was true. And we went home, and I remember putting on Iggy Pop's The Passenger and telling all of my mates. We all had to keep it secret, obviously. And yeah, that felt good.
I bet. Nice to relive those moments.
And this is from Stephen Knight, the brilliant, brilliant brain and writer behind Peaky Blinders.
It's Steve Knight here. I'm just curious, if you were Prime Minister, how would you prepare for a tough interview on the Radio 4 Today programme?
What a good question that is, Steve. Well, I would think, what do the listeners really care about? The most successful interviewees, I think, of which in my time covering politics have been David Cameron and Tony Blair, in British politics that is, were very good at working out what the public really did deserve an answer to and want an answer to, and what could be dismissed as the obsession of the kind of journalistic class and that they could dismiss. And I think working out before you go into an interview, where do I need to engage with the question? Where do I need to have a proper answer? Where do I need to listen to the question and engage with it, not just deliver a radio press release at which I read out what I'd planned to say in advance? And where equally do I say, no, look, I'm really sorry. That isn't important. I don't accept it's important. I don't accept you deserve an answer to that. It's not what matters. And having the confidence to do that is probably the advice I'd give if I ever advised a Prime Minister, which I won't.
I've often thought about this, actually, Stephen. It's a great question. I do think I would try to approach it in a slightly different way to how some of these guys turn up on the Today programme. You see them on screen and they're there and they're absolutely exhausted and they've done their sort of 17th interview of the morning. I would sometimes, if Nick Robinson was interviewing, I might just say, Nick, how are you doing? Not a great weekend for your boys up in Manchester, was it? Well, Nick, last time I spoke to you, it was at the top of it was in an aircraft hangar. Just something that just humanised it and normalised it. It doesn't mean it's trivial. It doesn't mean that if you go on to talk about Gaza or the humanitarian situation in Sudan, it's not serious. But I would just try to make it convivial. I would try to answer the question because I think it's maddening if you people can tell, listeners can tell when you're avoiding the question, so try and do that. And then the real trick is, know what the message is that you want to convey to the person at home. Find a way of both answering the question but also delivering that message and doing it in an honest way.